For example, cats are very beautiful.
There we go. All right, hey everyone, I'm Abbie Garcia, and I'm your host for Thoughts on That, a podcast where we dissect our thoughts and splice them into one little episode. And today, I'm joined by my little friends, little chingus in Korea. Why don't we introduce them right now, starting with Hayden.
Hi. My name's Hayden. I've been here for 7 years-ish. And yeah.
Great.
That's all.
Cool. That's friend number 2.
Hi, I'm Jasmine. I've been in Korea for 2 years. And yep, I use the she, they pronouns.
Yes.
So that's it.
Thanks for mentioning that as well.
My name is Meg. I've been in Korea for 1 year, but abroad for 4. Wow. Yeah, and I use she, hers, or whatever
Nice.
you want.
Hi, I'm Ariel. I've been in Korea for 2 years now, and I also use she, her pronouns.
We're just chilling right now in a little, Airbnb. We had a little barbecue, but we wanted to talk about creativity, today's topics. What is it, first of all? Can I ask y'all, what does creativity mean to you? Here's the textbook definition according to Oxford Languages. Creativity is the use of the imagination or original ideas, especially in the production of an artistic work.
Creativity is something where I'm producing something, and that doesn't necessarily mean I put it out into the world, I post it on anything. It just means I'm sitting down, I'm taking some time to make something, and usually for me that's art, I draw a lot, or writing, and it may never see the light of day, and I may throw it in the trash later, but I think the act of producing something is how I make my creativity. And also cooking, that's another thing.
Yeah.
I like to cook, and I don't create recipes, I just
Right.
follow things, but I still think that counts as creativity for me.
I think a lot of people think creativity specifically within the arts, like music, theater, dance, an expressive form. But I think, like you just mentioned, food is also creative practice. Also interior design, or just moving your furniture, that's creative because it's creative energy. I think anything where you produce or engage in our ideas in a new innovative way, it can be is what creativity is. And Exercising, yeah, because you can be creative with your body, with your hair, your hairstyle, right? The way you speak, honestly. Just, there's so many ways to be creative. It's not just limited to performing arts.
I mean, in that way, it's the question almost becomes what's not creative. I think I think we definitely know what's not creative. I think that's almost easier to answer. We can think of jobs that we've had where we felt like we had no productive, producing or creating power within that job, that we know when something's not creative, but then I don't know, I feel like thinking of what is creative is a little bit harder because it is so open.
Right. It's so abstract, and I feel like it definitely encompasses so many areas of our life. It's hard to pinpoint what is creative.
But I think that's really important because I feel like, so when I was in high school, I was in a band, and I was constantly playing guitar and constantly writing music and writing lyrics. And then my, going to college, almost ended my creativity, altogether.
Interesting.
Going to college, I was so busy, I didn't have time for that creativity.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel really disappointed that I lost all of those years, and I'm still trying to get back to, what it was for me in high school. But I have to remember, it's not just playing guitar and writing music that's creative. I am, I had never thought about that. I also cook a lot. That is a way that I often express my creativity.
I think of creativity also as something, now that I'm thinking about it, not something that just produces, but also something that challenges you in a way. Because you can have a job that's very creative in the sense that you are constantly being challenged. I also have a similar thing, too, where in high school, I used to write, and I actually wrote a 5-year letter to myself, and I got it, last year. And when I read it, I was like, wow, whoever wrote this is so beautiful at writing. The writing was so poetic, and there was so much beautiful language, and the way I wrote was very clearly a lot more creative, and I think in a way more masterful of the language. It which was interesting because in college I studied writing, so you think I would only have gotten better. But the truth is I'd gotten better technically. Like, I'd really worked on grammar, I had gotten a lot better at academic writing, but I had lost that creativity in the sense of, like, challenging the way that I thought of language instead of, because now I was working more in the confines of what we think of language, of, like, prescriptivist language and grammar. So, the similar thing happened with me. I'm trying to get back to that.
That's really interesting.
Damn. So, like, can I ask, like, how is your current relationship with creativity? Do you feel like you're inspired to be creative in your ways or produce or anything, or just be fresh with, like, yourself? Or do you feel like it's changed ever since coming to Korea? Because I don't know if y'all listeners know, but we do all live in Korea, and the reason why I wanted to have this podcast is that because ever since coming to Korea, I feel a little disconnected from creativity, being in a foreign country, because my main priority is surviving, and I haven't been able to give light or focus on my creativity of, like, producing new things or working with others. So that's why I wanted to ask other folks who also live in Korea what their relationship is with it.
I think, like, for me, one of the reasons I came to Korea was because I thought it would actually help with my creativity.
Interesting.
So one of my professors was like, go teach abroad because you can write a book, because you'll be so lonely. And the first year was really good for my creativity. I feel like I wrote all the time, and, like, I'd wake up early, and it was really productive. And then the second year, I feel like things have kind of shifted a bit, and it's been harder to be as creative because, like, obviously I'm, like, Meg and I are in a relationship, and we live in the same city now, which means we just spend more time together. And so it's not like before where I had all of this time. And so I feel like one of the things that I've noticed is, for me, like, when you build a life more in a place, you have less time to be creative. Or at least that's my thought.
Yeah. So do you think, like, that creativity is something that is a privilege then? Because it's definitely something it's not everyone's priorities. It's something that we can experience once we have the time. And because I think, like you said, your priority, or, like, your time is spent with Meg, and we don't have time for that creativity. And I think it goes to speaking as well, like, when you're in Korea, you're just trying to also survive as a foreigner and just navigate, like, day to day in a new country. So
Yeah, I relate to that because I think in the beginning it's just, like, finding stability in your life, and when you're, like, trying to, like, find stability in your life, you're trying to, like, I guess, like, plan out your time, and then, like, what time goes to what and what time goes to what. And I think in a way I wasn't really creative at all in the beginning of my time in Korea, because I think I was just trying to, like, find community, find friends, like, find some, like, stability in my life, and then, like, getting used to, like, new jobs, new environment, new culture. But then I think creativity kicks in a way that you don't think it would, which I think a lot of creativity comes with, like, when you're trying to cope with a lot of things. And for me, I think that's how, like, cooking has always been, like, my coping, like, creative, like, outlet. Like, just cooking, like, new foods, and, like, challenging yourself using, like, different ingredients from a country that, like, you don't really know what the ingredients are. Like, you don't even know what you're buying. They're, like, called different names in this country. Just using, like, creativity in the way to just cope with, like, your situation. Yeah.
To add on to that, I think I had, like, a similar but opposite reaction where, like, I used creativity to cope, but when I got here I was, like, so desperate to have hobbies and, like, keep myself busy with creative pursuits because I was so afraid of being alone or, like, by myself or sad. So I, like, picked up all these, like, exercising hobbies. That was really new for me. And I think going back to, like, it being a privilege as well, that was something I could never do as a student or before because I couldn't afford it or I didn't have time to do it. And when I got to Korea, not only was I scared to be alone, I also forced myself to do these things, or not forced, but I wanted to do these things because I finally had the money and the time to do them, which is not something most people have, or at least not students.
Absolutely.
damn. So do you think these challenges, because I know for you, Hayden, you became a YouTuber, and I think that's a creative, like, department, right? Do you think challenges in Korea have inspired you to produce more and be a lot more innovative with how you present yourself?
I think like, I think Korea just changed me a lot. Like, it helped me with, like, personality growth. And I used to be, like, a very private person and not share a lot of things about myself. But then I think, like, that whole thing we were talking about, like, a bigger purpose, bigger picture of, like, I felt like a lot of, like, queer and Asian stories weren't told. And, like, even in, like, America, Asians are, like, such a minority. But then in the country where there's, like, everyone's Korean, like, the queer community is, like, such a minority and, like, kind of, like, basically invisible.
Right.
And so I thought that there was actually, like, a big... I was, like, so afraid to share things about myself because it's not something I do. But then I thought, like... Because I thought about my family, I thought about, like, all of that. But then I just felt like, in the end, it's kind of, like, there's a bigger purpose that's, like, bigger than, like, my life and, like, what my parents think and, like, my parents' reputation and all that. And that's when I started using YouTube. And I never really used YouTube as, like, a creative outlet in so much in the beginning. It was just more like a coping outlet of, like, just being heard and sharing your story. And, like, because I also created YouTube because someone passed away. Like, a coworker passed away, and, like, she was also a Kyopo, and she was from Germany, and her parents were back in Germany, and, like, she came to Korea, and she, like, just, like, passed away in, like, her sleep. And I was just, like, it sucks because, like, her parents really never got to, like, know who she was or, like what she was up to or, like, just anything about her because I don't know, she was also, like, very, very distant from her family, being, like, first generation, like, born in Germany and stuff like that. And yeah, I don't know, where did I, like, drifted off?
No, it's okay. It's all relevant. It's all
It
creativity.
wasn't for creativity. It was more like for, like, coping.
I think that's an important distinction because I do think that creativity that's, like, for the sake of creativity is really different from creativity that's for the sake of getting by or, like, surviving. I think that's a very different I think what you produce ends up being different. What you make ends up feeling different, and it doesn't always feel good. Like, sometimes, like, that coping just feels necessary.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel it doesn't even always feel like a release. Sometimes it just feels like something you have to do. And I think that's different from I think the case could be made that is different from the kind of creativity that I think it's really interesting that you see that as different for YouTube, that YouTube, at least at the beginning, was not necessarily a creative outlet. It was, like, I think to us, we're like, oh, like, that's surprising. That sounds very creative. But I do think that's an important distinction.
Right. Like, a lot of the things we do that are seen as, like, an artistic masterpiece, but, like, it's not, that isn't the goal of it, like, to create something for everyone to admire. It's for something for ourselves to cope with, which makes sense. I think a lot of people don't recognize that, but it makes, hearing Hayden's story, definitely.
And honestly, sometimes, like, I think there can be a creative outlet that you have a relationship with that sometimes, like, just the way that you try to, like, maintain that habit is a form of coping. Like, for me, like, guitar used to come really easy to me. And now it doesn't. But when I play it, it doesn't feel creative. It feels kind of like coping. Because I'm just trying to hold on to it. Because guitar has been a part of my life for so long. And I don't have the relationship with it that I did as a kid. And I still am trying to get that back. So just doing it is a way of being like, no, I still can do the things that I could do before, and maybe one day I'll be good again. Like, sometimes it makes me sad, like, when I play guitar. Sometimes it bums me out because there's so many songs, hundreds of things that I used to be able to do that I've more or less forgotten. And yes, guitar is still, like, the thing that I go to when I'm upset, or, like, when I just need to, like, totally get out of my head. And that is, so it often feels like coping rather than actually creating.
Right. It's like there to support this, other than, like, it's not like an inspiring thing. It's like, I feel that.
It's like you're trying, like, it's like what was once stretching the boundaries of what you didn't know was possible. It's like now you know what is possible for you, but the capacity maybe isn't there, so it's like trying to reach that again, which is its own challenge, but maybe it's more disappointing, or it's more, it's not. I think there's different types of creativity, like you said, like with coping versus like creative pursuits. I think for me it's like very, very similar, but I've had similar things like that. Like learning Italian was a big thing for me, which I think also counts as a creative pursuit.
For sure. Oh my god, yeah.
And because it's very much, I think, broadening your horizons, but I've gotten so rusty in the past couple of years, and that's something that, like, instead of challenging my horizons with that, now it's kind of just returning to that sense of, like, what I once had, which I think is a different form of creativity. Like, it feels almost more like coping or something that's more, like, I don't know, a reminder rather than something that's actually, it's still a challenge, but it's not something that I would consider more productive, if that makes sense. Like, it feels like I'm not quite challenging myself in the way that I once was.
Do you feel frustrated then when it comes to that point where you sit down and, like, I'm gonna do this to cope, or like create, like, and how, like, after you feel frustrated, like, what's your next step? Like, do you just let it be, or do you, like, are you finding yourself being more compassionate with yourself or something, or?
Depends on how much time I have.
Yeah.
Actually, I feel better when, like, my creativity is for coping more, because it's like, it feels more like it's for, like, healing, right? For just, like, downtime, rest time. And I think creativity for productivity is very, like, there's a lot of pressure with that.
Right.
Because it's like, you have to be, like, like, unique and creative, and you have to make this kind of, like, content, or you have to do this. It's like the newest fad, and, like, that kind of pressure just doesn't make it creative anymore. Yeah.
So, for y'all, being, like, creative people in the past, and I mean currently now, but knowing what you were in the past, do you feel that pressure to live up to the past a lot?
Definitely.
Do you still struggle with that, or is that something you've kind of just, like, let go? Like, it's just not worth your time anymore?
I think I struggle with it all the time. Like, I constantly think of, and in some ways I think this can happen to people who move abroad.
Right.
Their sort of, their past becomes this sort of, like, crystallized memory, right? That you can access and be like, wow, things were good then. I was good then. Because the challenges that someone faces abroad are so, like, various, and they can be, like, quite overwhelming. And so I think something that was hard for me at first when I moved abroad and, like, started teaching English was I was like, I feel like I'm really bad at this, even though I want to be really good at it. And just sort of being like, I felt the need to find, wait, what am I good at? I keep forgetting what I'm good at. I can't find what I'm good at all the time. And I think in some ways I have not managed that pressure from within well abroad at all.
Do you think it's because you're focused on other parts of your life, like being in another country, where you didn't find it, like, a priority or something, or you didn't have the time?
Because of the, like, emotional isolation that I've experienced.
Right.
Less so here in Korea, but before I was in a small village of 4,000 people, and there was no one my age. I didn't have that many, like, expat friends or whatever, and I spent all my time comparing who I was in that moment to who I had. Like, there weren't enough interactions for me to be able to, like, just be who I was in the moment, right?
Having those interactions, like, made you lack that growth, essentially? Because I know a lot of people in Korea do feel isolated, and do you ever feel FOMO from that? Like, what if I had stayed home or anything?
I don't feel FOMO, oddly. I'm really glad. I was talking about this the other day. I actually feel kind of like I had, like, a late coming of age. I feel a bit like I came of age living abroad, like moving abroad.
I think that's, I think that's also a queer experience, especially someone, like, I think we both come from religious backgrounds, so I think that's something that's common as well, is kind of this late coming of age. But yeah, I definitely think, like, being abroad, it's hard to make those new memories, and so, like you said, it does kind of crystallize the past and make you think, oh, I used to do this, I used to go around and do this, and that can be really hard to accept when you go somewhere new. This kind of takes me back to my art, because there's this thing with art where, like, you are supposed to be constantly improving even if you're not drawing, So something that a lot of artists do is where they'll look back at their old art and they'll think, oh my god, this is so bad. What they thought was really good at the time, they look back on it and they think, oh my god, I realize I see so many issues with it now. And that's a good thing, though, because that means your artistic eye is developing. And so in the future, you can get better and better. And this whole conversation kind of takes me back to that, where it's like, I think even if I think I'm not improving or if I'm not actively using those creative muscles, I think in a way, our minds are still working on those things and still developing. So when I come back to my art, even if I haven't drawn in like 2 or 3 months, I can see a difference. And so I think even if we're not actively doing things, or if we have to make a big change like moving abroad, I think that doesn't necessarily mean that our creative pursuits are put on pause necessarily. I think our minds are still kind of working on it, but it can be hard to see that sometimes.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, I think like kind of like in terms of like improving your artistic eye, it's like you're always improving your mind, like if you're like genuinely trying to get to know other people and yourself, and if you're consuming media, right? Like, you're always learning, and so I think like that sort of thing always adds to what you are able to do in your creative pursuits.
True.
Whether that's for creativity or for coping, like
it develops something. It
does. It does.
It definitely applies to. There's something in your life that it helps. So, living in Korea, do you solely rely on yourself, on like using your art to just like cope or like be creative, or do you find other like have you found people in Korea or like even in Japan, like peers where you can collaborate with or just be inspired by?
I really missed my band. Like as soon as I moved, like for college, because my band was just in high school, I really missed my band for a long time. And I had sort of a ukulele trio, actually.
Cute.
We called ourselves the Six Tenors because we all sang in tenor range and we all had tenor. It was 10 ukuleles. It was a little silly. But, and when I moved to Japan, there was nothing. I just actually stopped playing altogether.
Wow.
But I've been really surprised. I think I can get that back. You know, a lot of my bandmates want to play again when I go back.
Hell yeah.
So we're gonna have a little like 15-year reunion or something.
Wow,
ridiculous.
it's been that long.
It's been a long time. Probably more like 12. D&D actually has been a really
cool,
interactive, collaborative form of creation that I have found a lot of joy in recently, and that's like that's really helped me the last few months, like creating characters, creating settings, and it's so collaborative. Like even if you're the DM and you're like creating your world building, it's up to the players to make that world real and to inhabit it, right? So that's something I've been really surprised by.
It's beautiful.
That's been super creative. Probably the most creativity I've sort of like churned out.
Yeah.
And just sort of like constantly in years.
Wow, that's so cool because a lot of people wouldn't expect like, oh, it's a board game or something, but a lot of people don't know that about like D&D or Dungeons and Dragons. So, like you collaborate with a lot of people and it's like improv too, right? Like that's such
Absolutely.
huge like a creative improvisational process too that we don't acknowledge. So that's so cool that you get that outlet as well.
I think I have a similar thing with fan fiction. I'm always kind of embarrassed to talk about it. My friends and I write fan fiction, and we actually review each other's fan fiction. We'll like read each other's stuff, and we'll go through it. And it's like super. Like I feel like a lot of nerdy stuff is very much collaborative, and you really, really are because you're inventing things. I actually, so this is kind of a tangent, but I watched a TikTok lately, and I was like these two adults on this beach, and they were just like playing house or something like that. Like it was like they were kids. They were just like playing this imaginative game. One of the comments was really interesting. It was like, it is so good to see adults interacting in this way because often we stop when we're kids. Like we stop when we get to like preteen stage. And it's so important for our imaginations to continue this kind of creative play, to imagine and role play and, have these things. So I think D&D is perfect for that. I think fan fiction is perfect for that.
Right.
Like a lot of these nerdy pursuits, I think people kind of don't know about them or they write them off, but they can be so good for like continuing that childhood experience of like pretending to do something.
Because like these communities that with fan fiction and D&D, are they mostly online or do you find a lot of them occupying the space digitally?
I mean, for fanfic, I would say, I mean, I only know what I know from a few of my friends, frankly, but it sounds like the community online is really strong. For D&D, obviously, there's a lot of like forums.
Right.
It's generally, and of course, a lot of people are playing online.
Online
right now.
too, right?
But I would say like the sort of meat of the D&D world is very much an in-person, friends around a table, you know, making something together for many hours, many
a
hours.
days,
Yeah.
many a years.
Yeah.
If we are at that point. Yeah, it's interesting because I think, like, in COVID times, a lot of things have moved more digitally, right? Like, in terms of interactions. So it makes me think, how has the creative community moved more digitally? It seems like they rely more in digital spaces to collaborate as well. So I was wondering, like, with fanfiction and D&D, if they've moved more in the like, online space to, like, hold their things, and if that has impacted on, like, where you find your community.
I'm part of why I started D&D. I'm just gonna keep.
Do it.
But I don't want to
sponsor it.
But part of why I actually really got into D&D was because I'd been playing a lot of like board games, but collecting board games gets like pretty expensive, and it's impossible out here. I mean, there's so many board games that I wanted that I just couldn't even order that would arrive in Korea. So things started getting bad in America with COVID. D&D, like the DMs Guild, which is like a website that like produces has a lot of like stuff. Oh no, that's not true. Sorry, it was D&D proper. D&D proper started releasing free materials every day, like coloring sheets for kids.
Wow.
Like modules and like adventures for any age, like rule books, like things that had previously not been free every day for like at least a month. And that's a lot of people just started playing because I think the slogan was like stay at home, play at home or something like that. And I think, and that's really when we started getting into it, and I just found it like such a comfort during lockdown. It wasn't really all that difficult here, I would say, compared to a lot of other places.
For sure.
But yeah, I think these times can introduce people to those kinds of outlets.
I think especially nowadays we're gonna rely more in terms of like the internet and digital spaces to connect with people, because I think even after post-COVID times, we're just so conditioned now to just rely on those spaces too, that it'll be a lot easier because it is more convenient, right? And like for me, I feel like since COVID I've been a lot more creative because I've been meeting a lot more like-minded creatives online, just no matter where they are in the world. And I think that's the wonder of the internet, like there's no barrier really. Like I think there's so many more possibilities, and that has expanded my innovation and my motivation to like just do stuff too.
A lot of people have started like baking and cooking.
Right.
A
Exactly.
lot of people, I feel like, are learning skills that they didn't.
Planting,
Right.
whatever it's called.
Planting? What is it? Herbology?
Oh, gardening?
Gardening,
Aromatherapy? I don't know that's
But I think the reverse is too true. At least for me, I've definitely experienced a lot of burnout. I think
Oh,
there was
right.
like
Oh,
2 weeks where I was like
God, yeah.
quarantined, and I made so much art, and I wrote so much, and then after that, like the past couple of months, I've been so burned out.
Interesting.
Like I can't. There was this thing going around in the fanfiction communities where people were like, "Oh my God, well people are gonna be home now. People are gonna be working from home."
Right.
That means there were a lot of fics that had not been updated in like years that were finally being updated. So people were like, "Oh my God, this is gonna be a renaissance for the fanfiction community," and it kind of was. But actually, like, not as much as people would think. Like, there's a lot of people who, first of all, are still working. And then second of all, because of this whole crisis, like, it's not a vacation, it is, like, a crisis. So a lot of people haven't been able to, even if they have time at home, maybe, they haven't had that creative energy.
Right.
And that's been my case, even though things have not been so bad here. It's like I have not been able to really keep up with drawing or practicing the guitar or doing anything like that because it's just been harder for me, I think, to feel any motivation to do it.
It's a hard time, and it's like it's so hard to just like we can't just be like turned on like a switch, like all right, let's be creative because we have this time. Like it's so there's so much pressure, especially now, like social media, like everyone's like oh, you have this time, you better produce something with like artists and stuff. And I think that's sometimes counterproductive because, you know, we don't recognize that we do need that time to just like chill. We just need the time to realize the reality of things. And, you know, creativity sometimes isn't our priority right now. Our priority now is just to care for our loved ones and survive. And yeah.
I think there's this idea that it's like, oh, well, like, no matter what's happening, like, artists can make art because, like, artists make art when they're suffering.
Right.
And I think, like, that's actually very untrue. I think, like, it's easiest to make art or be creative when you're, like, in a good financial position and you're able to see your friends and your family and, like, things are going well because, like, obviously that's, like, when you feel like you've got the most time and the most inspired. And, like, I feel like for me personally, like, I don't make the most, like, I don't write the most when I'm, like, having a really hard time.
Right.
Even if I do write then, like, it's, like, great, I wrote and it's been tough, but it's not, like, that's not when I do my best writing or my most of my writing.
Yeah.
Tortured artist.
Tortured artist.
Stereotype.
It's a stereotype still.
Right.
Like, yeah. If you're not an artist unless you're suffering, which is like, how do you guys feel about that? That like stereotype? Do you think it's true to some sense, or do you think it's a kind of like toxic essentially to like the creative community?
I think it's kind of what we go back to what we're talking about with how like we can use our creative efforts to cope. So I think that's where the confusion kind of comes in because oftentimes art does come as a coping mechanism.
Right.
Or it comes from personal experiences, which can often be traumatic or whatever. But I think, yeah, definitely, we can't pathologize art. We can't say that, like, art is something that people create out of suffering, because I think that's a very detrimental view of art.
Right.
And it also makes it so that people feel like they have to suffer. I think Van Gogh is a really big example of this. You know, and people always say, oh, he was such a beautiful painter, but he, you know, suffered so much, but maybe that's why he was so good at painting. And I don't think that's true at all. Like, people often say, like, imagine if Van Gogh had had the resources he needed, if he had been able to find a better place, like if he had been able to, you know, work through what was haunting him. I think, you know, imagine that he could have made if we had been able to give him those resources.
Yeah. Imagine.
Right. It's like, I think he's, you know, I think in a lot of ways people tend to use him as the picture boy,
right.
The tortured artist. And I think it can be really, as someone who likes to create art too, I do use it to cope. But I don't want it to be something where it's like, look at my art, like this is my suffering and you know.
I don't think a lot of art is not reflecting on your suffering. There's a lot of happy art.
Right.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
I feel that people don't.
And I do think people like thrive more on like with like resources.
Yeah, a community, right?
Yeah, and like
support group.
Support group. I think when you are in like survival mode or like you're going through a lot of hard times, it is like coping, but it's like I feel like, I don't know, for me it feels like it's just like your bone, like there's no like flesh with it, there's no muscle with it. It's just like the bare
minimum.
I get what you mean. Not the bare minimum, but like there's no like substance. It's just like you sort of form, sort of skeleton.
Reproduce essentially. Yeah, that makes sense. It's just to produce. It's not like, and there's no authenticity to it or anything.
No, there is. Because it's like your bones.
It's more like survival.
But I mean, like, you know, like if you have bones, I don't know.
I guess we get it. I'm sure
Okay.
it makes sense. It does make sense. Yeah, it's just hard to articulate.
It's like your muscles and your flesh have more substance than
right,
just
your dermis, your epidermis, all that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Considering y'all are moving back to the West, do you think your creative energy will flow differently, or like it'll be not like maybe influenced more, inspired more, or do you think it'll be stifled considering the given situation?
Well, I'm gonna do a Master's of Fine Art in creative writing, so I think it's gonna be a pretty good environment.
Right.
So yeah, I think like the reason I kind of want to do it now is because I feel finally ready. I had known I wanted to do this for a long time, and so it was like, okay, go spend some time in a different country, have a different experience, and then come back and do this thing. So I imagine that, like, because of how my schedule will work, I'll do what I generally like to, which is write in the mornings, and then kind of, like, take care of my life after that.
Interesting.
Because I also feel like something, like, some advice I got when I was in college was, like, always make sure to, like, take care of your teeth. If you're a writer, because it's takes way more time and way more money later on that you aren't going to have. And so if you want to be an artist, or if you want to like make creativity a big part of your life,
right,
you really need to take care of yourself, because like it's not often a high paying field.
Yeah.
And another type of advice I got was like, always do your taxes and always do them well. In Canada, at least, like they generally tend to audit people who make like $10,000 as a ballerina, rather than like audit, the CEO who's like hiding money.
For sure.
And like I got audited, I think 4 times
Wow.
in Canada. So, and like I was a waiter. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent, but
No,
back to my life.
it's good advice too.
Yeah.
I think also it'd be very stressful, because I'll have to create a lot more and
Yeah.
more deadlines.
Right.
And you'll be responsible for helping other like minds work towards
your
their creativity
mentor,
as a teacher, as a TA.
Yeah.
Kudos to you. Best of luck. It's gonna be a good time.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, good vibes. You'll do well.
What about you?
Yeah, I think I struggle a lot with expectations. I'm like, I have very high I think I put a lot of expectations on myself when it comes to like creativity, because for me creativity, I've mentioned guitar a lot, but it is also language learning.
Right.
And I'm very hopeful. I do have a lot of expectations for myself going back. Like, I'm going to be in Texas. I'm going to be near my old bandmates.
Hell yeah.
We're going to try to, like, we've been wanting to collaborate for years again. So that's something I'm super hopeful about, that just, I never got good at the whole, like, sharing stuff and working on it via, like, the internet. I just never got good at it. And, like, I'm hopeful, but also I'm hoping that I don't put too much on myself, because I'm going back during a really dangerous time to one of the worst states, and I don't trust everyone who I'm going to be living with, or I have no idea what's going to happen. I have no idea what it's going to look like. I'm going to be in grad school, so that's going to have to that's going to have to take a little bit of the priority, of course. But I'm hopeful. I'm trying to set myself up so that I can get back into the things that I really want to get back into.
Nice. Hope your process.
Yeah.
But yeah, go to bathroom. Go to Jasmine's going to the bathroom. Everyone, let's everyone pause. We're gonna have some toilet ASMR.
Oh.
Yeah.
I talk to my therapist.
Thank you for listening to Thoughts on That. Before we end this, what are your thoughts on creativity? What's your current relationship with creativity? Is your creative outlet cooking? Is it watching the skies go by and looking at all the types of clouds there are? And is it something you like to do? Because sometimes people do feel pressure to create, right? So what is your relationship with it? And do you think COVID specifically has impacted your process, your community? Is it more digital now, or is it something you just do on your own? Do you lock yourself in a room to produce or be creative? So these are some questions I like to ask y'all. And yeah, let us know in the comments below, because we are only on YouTube and SoundCloud. But if you like us, if you share with your friends, if you support us by just talking about us or even just commenting, we'll grow, and hopefully we'll be in other digital platforms as well. So thanks for listening, listeners, to Thoughts on That, and we'll see you next time. In the meantime, stay creative. Or not. Who knows? All right. Bye.